Thanks for joining today. A very warm welcome. My name is Matt Larsen-Daw. I'm the CEO of the Mammal Society. And before I get started in the content of the webinar today, just to give a nod to partners on this project, the Volunteer Mountain Hare Survey, BTO, Nature Scott, and the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust. It's through Nature Scott funding that we're able to run and support this survey. And that allows us to also to offer trainings like this for free, which is great. So before I get started with mountain hares specifically, just for those of you that might not be aware, a little bit about Mammal Society. So we are a nationwide conservation organisation supporting science-based conservation across the United Kingdom, the British Isles and Ireland. And our vision is for a future in which sustainable mammal populations thrive as part of healthy and diverse ecosystems benefiting people and nature across the British Isles. So a lot of the work that we do is supporting the monitoring of mammals. For those of you that already do mammal surveying, you'll know it's not as straightforward as it is for some wildlife. And as a result, mammals are among the least recorded species in the UK, which is bad news for conservation generally, but especially as mammals are declining rapidly. 1 in 4 of the species in the native species in the UK are threatened with extinction from the UK, and many more are declining. So while we have a few success stories to point to show that conservation really does work, we really need to know what's going on in ecosystems across the country to be able to decide how to protect and restore mammal populations for the future. So we work in 3 broad ways. We inspire, inform, support, and enhance conservation projects and policies that protect and restore native mammal populations and their habitats. We work a lot to empower conservationists, students, citizen scientists, and nature champions to play a key role in mammal conservation. Hopefully, that's part of the reason you're here today. And we seek to build public awareness of and support for mammal conservation through education, communications, and campaigns. And although I don't have a slide for it, that's probably a good time to mention that we have National Mammal Week every year, which comes up at the end of April, the last full week of April. If I've got time, I'll say a little bit more about how you can get involved in that at the end. But in order to jump straight into the subject of today's webinar, which is taking part in the Volunteer Mountain Hare Survey, just want to point out the free Mammal Society app, the Mammal Mapper app. It's just in the process of having its annual upgrade. So if you have a new smartphone, particularly an Android smartphone, you might find you have some trouble installing it. That should be resolved in the next couple of weeks. If, like me, you've got a very old model, you'll have absolutely no problems. And it's free for Apple and Android, and you can follow that link or just search Mammal Mapper. And if that doesn't bring it up on its own, Mammal Mapper, Mammal Society. So this is the tool that we recommend people use to take part in the Volunteer Mountain Hare Survey. There'll be various references to things that you can do within this app. So if you want to kind of surreptitiously download it now, if you don't already have it on your phone, you'll be able to do some of the setup that I'll describe as we go through the webinar today. I'm just going to launch a very short poll. This is for my benefit, really, so I know how much detail to go into in certain aspects of today's webinar. If you're happy to just respond, I won't be sharing the results. I'll just have a look at them myself and maybe just comment on some key findings. So I'll launch that now. That should pop up in front of you. There's just 2 questions to click your response to. The first one, which of these applies to you best? And it's just to get a sense of those of you that might be based in the Highlands where the Mountain Hare Survey is focused, or you might be planning to visit, or you might visit regularly anyway. So the Mountain Hare Survey is something that you can support. And then the second one is just out of interest, really, whether you've already seen mountain hares in the wild. So on that second one, I can already see it's a perfect 50-50 split. So that's quite good for this. And it's a real mix across the other one as well. So I'll bear that in mind. So we've got those based in the Highlands who could literally go out this afternoon and do a survey, and others who will hopefully have an opportunity to in the near future. Okay, thank you very much for doing that. That's really helpful for me. So to kick off, I'm just going to give a bit of background about the focus species for today, which is the mountain hare. So the mountain hare is our only native British lagomorph. So we have three in the country. We have the mountain hare, we have rabbits, and of course we have brown hares. They are both introduced. Brown hares much longer ago than rabbits, and it's slightly disputed as to exactly when brown hares would have become fairly naturalized across our landscapes. But there is evidence of it around 2,000 years ago, and brown hares have very much become part of our folklore and culture, and can be seen in all sorts of artistic representations of nature going back a very long way. Rabbits introduced much later, probably about 1,000 years ago by the Normans. They would have been a food species for the Romans, but in terms of when they became established in the landscape, we can have a fairly clear sense of them appearing across the landscape around 1,000 years ago. So the Mountain Hare Survey is focused on the Highlands. That isn't the only place you can find mountain hare, but there is a subspecies of mountain hare found in Scotland, which is Scoticus, and it's more closely related to the alpine subspecies than it is the Scandinavian and even than the Irish subspecies. So as some of you may know, in Ireland they have basically the same animal, mountain hare, but they don't call them mountain hare, they call the Irish hare. Still, some of the names which are given to the mountain hare apply to the Irish hare as well, sometimes known as the blue hare or the snow hare, because of the way they change their color in the winter to become this beautiful white, sometimes even seems like a bluish white, and it's quite a distinctive appearance that they have. So the diet of mountain hares, they are herbivores, so they eat heather, grass, rushes, and sedge species, and their habitat is generally the heather moorlands above 300 meters. That's not their historic range. They would have also been very common at lower altitudes, and it's more where they've ended up by being driven out of some of their native range by brown hares that would have spread across the countryside looking for much the same habitat, but at that lower altitude. They are about 2.5 to 3.5 kilograms in weight, and they are, although in this picture they kind of look about the same size as a rabbit, they are actually quite a lot bigger than your average rabbit. They can get up to over 0.5 meter in height when they're up on their legs, and slightly bigger than that in Ireland, in fact. So the Scottish ones are slightly smaller than Irish, partly as a result of their habitat conditions. They live, as an individual, they live for up to 12 years, but that's quite rare. So generally speaking, they will live for about 3 to 4 before they're predated or they fall foul of some other fairly natural reason to die. The males mature the males mature each year before the females. So you have young adults, young adult males just coming into their mating season ahead of females that were born at the same time. And they will be breeding from late January onwards. So we're currently in the breeding season for mountain hare. But they do breed throughout the year. They can have up to 4 litters. Again, 4 is pretty rare. And it depends on how mild the year is, how much the food availability is, and how big the population is already. And each time they have a litter, it can be between 1 and 3 offspring. So it's quite a small number each litter, but they can keep that kind of heartbeat of breeding up throughout the year. We're obviously talking about surveying them today, but it's useful to be aware of their conservation status. So they are considered to be highly vulnerable in terms of the UK population, and that's because they are now in an extremely restricted range up in the Highlands and just a couple of introduced populations elsewhere, like Peak District and in Wales. And they are thought to be declining within their range, although it's actually really difficult to tell, which is why, as I'll talk a little bit more about shortly, why we really do need a survey effort up in their Highland range. Their favorable habitat is pretty much the exact habitat that's created on grouse moors. The kind of allowing the heather to grow so that you've got soft new growth heather that you can munch on, also providing cover but not getting so big or allowing trees to grow, which would then inhibit the heather. And also on grouse moors, there is predator control. So some things like foxes and birds of prey might be deterred. That allows, as well as the grouse able to freely thrive, it also helps the mountain hares. So mountain hares are often in quite large numbers around landscapes with grouse moors, but that can give us a somewhat artificial sense of how many mountain hares there are in general, because it could be that we're seeing quite a high concentration of the remaining population in those particular favorable habitats. And then in other parts of the range, they really are far less populated. So that's why we do need that data. So that first image that I showed is probably the classic picture of a mountain hare, gorgeous white fur with the little black tips to the ears. But it's really important to note, if you're going to go out surveying them, that they look very different at different times of year. So they are famously white in the winter, hence many of their names: snow hare, blue hare, Arctic hare. But you'll see on the left there, that's what they look like in the summer. And you might feel there's a lot more chance that you might mistake a mountain hare for a rabbit at a distance in the summer, when they have that sort of brown pelage. And then they look really distinctive in the spring and the autumn when they're basically moving between their two coats. So as you can see, there's a kind of dirty mixed marbled effect that emerges as they either lose their summer coat and gain their winter coat, or the other way around. They really do look very striking at this time. And actually they do particularly well, they camouflage particularly well in with a kind of landscape which is just losing its snow. I think it's probably a bit of a coincidence. But if they jump out in front of you and you're on a heather moor, or if you're driving along the road and one comes out in front of the road, there's certainly no mistaking it for anything else at that time. Yeah, that's the spring or autumn look there. The one feature that remains consistent throughout the summer, spring, autumn, and winter is the black or very dark brown tips to their ears. And that's, you can see even on the winter coat there, they've still got the little black tips. So that's a really useful distinguishing feature to be aware of. And obviously it becomes less obvious when they have a dark coat, but you still can make them out, particularly when their ears are up. And that's something which sets them apart from both rabbits and brown hare. So after their first year after birth, mountain hares become sexually mature, as I mentioned, and mating is taking place at the moment out there, just as we're sort of we're moving from winter into spring. Female mountain hares will have a gestation period of 50 days. So generally speaking, the leverets are born in March to July, and then over the course of that summer, there might be several litters of 1 to 3 offspring each. Larger females, funnily enough, it's not fully understood why, breed earlier, and that's potentially because they are more likely to be able to have multiple litters. And you will see some of the behavior in breeding season that you might associate with brown hares, if they're a species that you see more than you do mountain hare, where you get males, several males sometimes chasing females, and quite often being rebuffed with this boxing behavior. So that's kind of iconic image of the sort of March hares boxing in the fields, which is normally depicted with brown hares. It is something that you can see on the slopes with mountain hares, perhaps slightly less dramatically, but it's the same behavior. When the leverets are born, they are born fully furred with their eyes open, and they need very little parental care. They just get visited once every evening by their mother to suckle. And apart from that, they just stay huddled until they feel confident enough to start exploring. And when they're able to start foraging for themselves, that's pretty much ending the parenting aspect of their life. So we already know that mountain hare population densities fluctuate. We're not entirely sure how consistent that pattern is because of the lack of data, but it seems to reach a peak approximately every 10 years. So if we have one snapshot survey across the Highlands 1 year, that's not that useful unless we can also keep that survey effort going over a number of years so that we can see whether that was actually at peak or somewhere on the way to peak or coming down the other way. We need to kind of have that long survey period to really get a sense of how the population is really doing from a sustainable point of view. Mountain hares, one of the useful things about them, if you're considering going out and surveying for them, is that they don't burrow. So they rest in forms and scrapes above ground, same as brown hares. And they will huddle in amongst any available foliage, any tufts of heather, any tussocks, and also in the lee of stones. So they might not be very visible and they might not be out in the open foraging by daylight, but they will be above ground. And so if you have a reason to think they might be there and you are really diligent with your binoculars, you can find them. And in places where the population is quite high or the predator numbers are low, they will be bolder and they will come out in the daytime, particularly if daylight is short. So in the winter months, if you have winter time in the winter without snow cover and you're able to get up on the slopes, that's actually one of the best times to see them for a number of reasons. One, as you can see in this picture, if they have their white winter coats but there isn't snow, they're actually standing out more rather than being camouflaged, which is the point of the white coat. But also they will be making use of the warmth of the day to get out and to take what foraging opportunities they can, rather than the cold nights. When there is snow cover, you'll often find that the mountain hares in an area will gather on the leeward hill, so the sheltered side of the mountain, if they've got the choice. So you'll see large groups of them coming together in the place that's most sheltered and where there might be the least snow covering up their food source. At that point, in the early spring, when the leverets have been born, the first load of leverets has been born, that's when they're particularly vulnerable to predators. And mountain hare do have a number of predators, so both terrestrial and airborne, so foxes, stoats, unfortunately domestic cats, wild cats where they exist, buzzards and eagles. And eagles, particularly sea eagles, can take adults as well, even though they are big animals. Sea eagles have been known even to take young roe deer, so they can easily take a mountain hare. So distinguishing mountain hare from the other two species that I've mentioned, so starting with brown hare. So the first thing to note is it's quite unusual for both of these species to be in the same place at the same time. So one of the issues, one of the reasons why I kind of bring up the similarities is if you're not entirely sure, if you're in somewhere where you feel there could be brown hare, there could be mountain hare, and you're seeing signs of hare, the signs of hare, the scrapes, the forms, and the droppings, which I'll come to, are pretty much identical for these two species. So unless you actually see the animal, you might be unsure which one is actually present. But as you can see, there are some real similarities in terms of the way they leap, the length of the back legs, and the overall shape, the lack of a tail. But brown hares are considerably bigger, so they're about 55 to 70 centimeters in length, as opposed to mountain hare that are around half a meter. And the brown hare is the real giveaway. They are obviously notably bigger proportionately in relation to their size than mountain hare, and they don't have the black tips necessarily, although as you can see in this picture, They often do have a darkening to the end of their ears, which could confuse you if that was the only thing you were going on. Um, the little tail that you do have on the mountain hare is white, whereas on the brown hare there is a black top to it. But the real distinguishing feature, if you get close enough, or if you've got good enough binoculars, is the eyes, where you have the brown hare with these kind of very kind of startlingly orange amber eyes, whereas a mountain hare has these sort of warmer chestnut brown eyes. And then, of course, we've talked about the kind of changing coat color for the mountain hare. That doesn't happen with brown hare. When they get their winter coat, they might look a little bit paler just because the coat gets a little bit longer, a little bit more fluffed out. But it's certainly nowhere near as striking as the transformation for the mountain hare. So it's actually more likely that you're going to struggle to distinguish between mountain hare and rabbit, because when it comes to things like the overall shape and the length of the ears, rabbits are actually a little bit more similar. Rabbits are smaller, but of course, if you're just seeing one animal from a distance, it can be really difficult to get that real sense of scale, and it's very unlikely you're just going to have two sitting next to each other for you to compare. So rabbits are quite a lot smaller. Look for those black tips to the ears. Rabbits don't have them. And if they're moving, so if they're not just hunched, so mountain hare in its form, when it's all hunched up, can look particularly rabbit-like. But if you can see them moving across the landscape, rabbits have this bobbing gait, so it's kind of like a blomp, 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 whereas mountain hare will lollop and leap, and you really get a sense of the length of those legs. So there's quite a big difference in the way that they move, but of course they might not be moving when you spot them. You can go by the eyes again, and that's where unfortunately there isn't quite the same difference as there is with brown hare. But with rabbits, they look far more like prey species, so they have these large eyes that take up a lot more of the skull and head. And the main thing to look for is are you somewhere where rabbits are likely to be? So if you're above the tree line or above 300 meters on a mountain, rabbits are far less likely than they are down in the lowlands. So mountain hare droppings. So I've got two different animal droppings here. So one of them is mountain hare, and the other one is a different animal. So I don't know if anyone wants to take a guess on the chat which other animal I've represented and which one it is. These were found in the same landscape. So this is a kind of typical looking for signs, and it can be really difficult. So with this close-up, you'll be able to hopefully see some really clear differences between these two droppings. But obviously, if you just find a few droppings on the ground, they're a similar shape, they're a similar size, they're not that far off in terms of color. So I wanted to point out the key differences here. So on the left, we have red deer droppings. And on the right, we have mountain hare droppings. So red deer are our biggest terrestrial mammal in the UK, and mountain hare are obviously one of our smaller mammals, and yet they have droppings that are largely the same size. Now, obviously, they have the same diet. Largely, they're eating grasses and heather. The deer are able to process it much more with their really big stomachs, and it comes out basically like a sort of shiny ball of puree. So I've broken them apart there so you can see on the top. Whereas mountain hare, they're much smaller, and there are still recognizable strands of grass, and it's a lot more fibrous. So that's one of the giveaways. This is worth noting that this is after the mountain hare has eaten it twice, because they do their poo once and they basically eat it straight out of their anus. It goes through again and it comes out as quite a dry pellet in this shape. There is a slight sort of yellowish greenish tinge to it, which is different from the dark brown that you normally see with deer. But it's a tricky one to base your ID on, because when deer poos have been out on the hill for a little while, maybe baking in the sun or being battered by the rain, they do start to lose that perfect smooth finish, and they can start to look a bit paler, and so it's much easier to mix them up. The other thing to look for is that with mountain hare droppings, and this is the same for brown hare droppings, they are in fact not tic-tac shaped or cylinder shaped. They have a sort of flattened profile, so they're a bit more like lozenges, like lockets, cough lozenges. So if you do find a few, and you can see that they all consistently have that slight flattened profile, that's another indicator that it's hare rather than deer. But as you can see, it is tricky to tell them apart, particularly if you don't have the two side by side with a pre-existing ID. So what we normally say with droppings is, if you find droppings that look like they might be hare, use that to give you a boost, that it's really worth looking closely in that landscape and look for other signs and look for the hares themselves. But we probably wouldn't consider just droppings on their own with no other evidence to be 100% verified evidence of presence, because it could be deer, it could be brown hare, depending on the landscape. So the distribution of mountain hare, as I've described, the Volunteer Survey is focused on the Highlands, which is basically the stronghold for this native species now, which is one of the reasons why we're really keen that we do have a very clear sense of how the population is doing, and we don't make any assumptions on the basis that we think the population is doing fine where it exists. Because if we were to lose the population in the Highlands, or if it was to become depleted to the point when it starts inbreeding and they lose their genetic strength, that is basically signaling a bleak future for this native species, because we can't replenish from anywhere else apart from outside the country, and we would lose this subspecies. So at the moment, they're largely confined to Scotland, and as I mentioned, there's a small isolated population in the Pennines, but it's kind of considered separately from the Highland population. So you'll see here, this is map squares showing presence across the Highlands, and this is already likely to not be up to date. This is from 2016-17 season, and what we're aiming to do is get a real clear, reliable sense year on year of how that changes, so that we can ascertain, first of all, whether they are occupying all of their potential range, and whether the population is healthy and thriving, and see over time whether or not that's diminishing because of any human influences, or climate change or anything else like that. So I've mentioned already they are near threatened in Britain and Scotland. They obviously have their own status in Ireland, where there's the different subspecies. But globally, they are considered least concern. There are healthy populations elsewhere in the world, but they are, as I mentioned, they're only native lagomorph, and they have become considered their own subspecies through being that isolated population for quite some amount of time. It's always tricky to build up conservation concern around a species that is considered least concern under IUCN. So we really like to emphasize their importance within the British Isles, and obviously the UK ecosystem, as well as their vulnerability in that context. Okay, so that is a bit of an overview on mountain hares as a species and their status. If anyone has anything that they were hoping I would cover and I haven't covered, or if they've got any questions on what I've covered there, please do throw questions at me in the chat, and I'll try and cover them. What I'm going to do now is jump into the practicalities of surveying, and it would be really great if this was a practical guide and a series of steps that you felt able to follow, right to the point of going out and taking part in this survey over the course of the next few months, because we do struggle for volunteer effort in the Highlands, and it is because it is a very rugged, challenging landscape. There is a lot of it, and there are very few people resident to do it. So if you are able to take part in the survey as a result of the training today, you really would be performing a really valuable service for conservation. So I mentioned the Mammal Mapper app earlier. So this is our free app for recording mammals. It's not just for this survey, it's for any mammal surveying. We don't keep the data ourselves. We pass it on to iRecord, which you may have heard of, which is a really useful app for recording biodiversity. It's not mammal specific, and so we've created Mammal Mapper to make sure that you record everything that is most useful and important when you're recording a mammal species, and that all gets passed through as part of that biological record. iRecord will pass every record through a verification process. So a wildlife expert, particularly in that taxa, will have a look. We'll look at the photo if there is one, and we'll look at the likelihood of where you were and what species was recorded. And when it's verified, it will also become part of the NBN database. So that's the biodiversity database for the whole nation, which is freely accessible to all. It can take quite a long time for the data to funnel into that because it needs to be verified. But that's a really, really useful resource for conservation and research. So if you do have the Mammal Mapper app already, then you could do this as I talk you through it. Otherwise, these slides will be available, and there's a recording of this same training on the website if you need a recap. But the first thing we would want you to do is to go to the More in the settings and select the settings under the Mammal Mapper app. And then you'll find that there's an option to turn on Volunteer Mountain Hare Survey. So if you don't do this, there is already the option to record a mountain hare. So if you were out on a walk and you just happen to see a mountain hare and you just had the Mammal Mapper app, you can go into the app, you can click where you are, and you can click I've seen a mountain hare, and it will take that record, and you can add a photo or whatever else. However, for the Volunteer Mountain Hare Survey, there's some additional functionality that is enabled if you switch it on in settings, which will hopefully become apparent why that's useful and important to us. So if you are actually definitely going to be in the Highlands, we would really love you to turn that functionality on. You'll also understand shortly why that's not switched on as default, because it does bring in some extra functionality to the Mammal Mapper app that might confuse people if they're not actually trying to take part in this particular survey. So when you've got that toggled on, you can go back home and you can click Start Survey. Now we have 3 different kinds of survey that you can undertake for the Mountain Hare Survey. And I'm going to introduce you to all of them. One is called Hare Only, one is called Hare Ramble, and one is called Hare Square. These are all surveys. So this is where you go out into a landscape, particularly to take part in the Volunteer Mountain Hare Survey. You turn one of these on, you start your survey, you do it for a certain amount of time, and then you finish. That's really, really important data for us. In addition to all of these 3 is what we call ad hoc records, which is what I've just described, which is where you just happen to see a mountain hare and you record it. Now, obviously, we factor all of that data in. It might be that we have records of mountain hare that pop up randomly because somebody was just doing a hill walk and they saw a mountain hare and they recorded it. And that's really valuable because it might be that that's an unsurveyed square and we can still record that as presence. But the reason why we want people to go out and actually conduct the survey is because if you say you're conducting a survey in the landscape and you don't see mountain hare, we have a record that a survey was undertaken and that no mountain hare was seen. And that's really, really important data. That's where we can actually feel confident that a blank square is not just because no one went and looked. So hopefully that makes sense if any of you are already surveyors and any of our other surveys or just generally wildlife surveyors, you'll know that 0 data is incredibly valuable. So just to see what that looks like in the app. So if you've already toggled on the Mountain Hare Survey option and you click on Start Survey, well, actually, no, it's just going to show you there more. There you go. That's what it looks like. So conducting the Volunteer Mountain Hare Survey, click. And you'll see already there's a mention there that when you toggle that on, you'll also be prompted, or you'll also be able to record upland birds. So this is partly the result of this being a survey that's organised in partnership between the Mammal Society and the BTO, funded by Nature Scott, and with the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust as a partner as well. And they're obviously really interested in upland birds. And we're both interested in the relationship that might exist between mountain hare and upland birds. So is it the same habitat that's favorable for one is favorable for both? Is there any kind of correlation where one thrives and so does the other, and so on? We do, however, understand that some people who might take part in a Mammal Society survey might not feel that they're actually bird experts, and vice versa. People who are out there bird watching might not feel that they know enough to recognize the signs of mammals in the landscape. So it's kind of just providing the functionality so that people can contribute to both those data sets, and it's very valuable to the survey if people can. But what that means is that then you'll get a little bit of information about the Volunteer Mountain Hare Survey, obviously not as much as I'm running through today. And you'll suddenly have this functionality to select birds as well as mammals when you're in Mammal Mapper. Please, if you do have that functionality switched on, only do that if you're doing the Mountain Hare Survey up in the Highlands. Otherwise, the data is probably not going to go anywhere. But it is really valuable as part of what you record for a mountain hare survey. Within the Mammal Mapper app, you'll also get access to some reference information. So we have a kind of mammal directory in there, and as well as just listing all the mammals and showing you some pictures to help you ID them, you'll see that there's pictures of the dung, and there's pictures of the footprints as well. And you'll find the same thing for the bird species. So if you're not a bird expert, but you kind of feel like you know enough to be able to tell, one of the species on the list from another, then the app will help you to just do that with confidence. So when you are undertaking the survey, you start your survey on the Mammal Mapper app, and you select whichever one you're going to use. So the easiest one, the one which has the kind of least process and methodology to it, is a hare ramble survey. So what that means is you're going on a walk in the Highlands. It's within the area of the Mountain Hare Survey, but you're just going to go for your walk. That's what you plan to do. And while you're walking, you're going to keep an eye out for signs of mountain hare and any other species. That means that when you take your walk, the fact that you walked and you were looking out for mountain hare signs and you were able to recognize them because you'd read the information about the Mountain Hare Survey or been on one of these trainings, we can then take no records of mountain hare as an indicator of no presence of mountain hare. So it doesn't actually matter whether you specifically go to a certain square or not. It's just the fact that you're walking in the Highlands, and we can use that data for the Mountain Hare Survey. So that's quite straightforward. As you walk, if you spot anything which is a sign of a mammal, we obviously want you to photograph it and record it. So in this case, there's some rabbit holes there that I've seen as I did this survey. Mammal Mapper will prompt you to take you through a series of screens to just say what you've seen. In this case, den or burrow, and then it will GPS tag the location. If you don't have any data and the photos are not going to be uploaded, it will still record it locally, and then it'll upload it when you can reconnect to Wi-Fi back at home. So that's a ramble survey. Then the other option is that you come and do a mountain hare square survey, and this is the gold standard for the survey methodology in this case. This is what we would really love you to feel able to do off the back of this training, and that's where you go to the Volunteer Mountain Hare Survey webpage, and you sign up and register as a surveyor, and you select a square from somewhere in the range of mountain hare that you are going to survey. You agree to go out and survey it, then you go out and you conduct a survey using the methodology that I'm about to describe. And that is really, really helpful for us. And if particularly if we can get people to survey the same squares year on year, because then we'll actually be able to chart change. So if you do come to the website with a willingness to do this, I'm just switching to the online portal there. So this is on the BTO's website, but you can, if you're not sure off the back of this training exactly how to get to the point when you've got the details of a square and you're going out and doing the survey, there's a form on the Mammal Society website. You can just sign up to express interest and we'll talk you through it over email or on a call. We can send you details of the square that's convenient for you. But if you can do it all yourself, that's great. This is on the BTO website. You'll need to set up an account to get all the way through the process, but I'll be able to show you the basics. So this is the range that the survey covers. And if you zoom in, if you get close enough, you'll see the grid. Each of these is one of the survey squares, and you'll see a number of them are highlighted in red. So they are randomly allocated within the range. And the idea is that we can't possibly get every single one of these squares surveyed because we just don't have the volunteer effort. There just aren't enough people to do that every year. So we've allocated 10% of them randomly to give us an indicator sample. And so the ideal for us would be that you select one of these red squares that you can and are willing to go out and survey. And then when you've clicked on it, you'll be sent the actual map square and the location, and you'll be able to register to say that's the one you intend to survey. And then it will become grayed out so that somebody else who comes along will choose a different red square, and we don't just get 5 people going out separately over the course of the season to survey the same square, and there's loads that are unsurveyed. So these are randomly allocated, so there's a good chance that some of them are actually quite inaccessible. So we realise that, and there is a way of kind of dealing with that that's described on the BTO website, which is basically that if you make your if you think, well, I'm going to be camping in, near this forest, so I'm going to be able to I'm going to be able to survey that square. If you register to survey that square and then you go out and you're camping here and you do a walk up to here and you find that actually this is really inaccessible for whatever reason, and you end up having to survey this square, you can just let us know that. And what we'll do is we will recognize that there was a particular reason that means that square is unreachable. This is the nearest equivalent, and we'll take that as the square instead. So it kind of comes, that landscape still has been kind of randomly sampled. So what we don't, I'll come to safety if you're surveying a little bit just in a few minutes. But yeah, the most important thing is always your safety. So what we don't want is for someone to feel duty bound to persevere and try and survey their square. And you might ask yourself as you're trying to do that, why the hell is the Mammal Society making me do this? But we're not. These are randomly allocated. And so we factor in the possibility that some of them might need to be moved. So when you have signed up for a square, if you do it yourself, you will then receive a BTO email that will include details of that square with an ordnance survey map that you can print out, and some more of information about paper forms that you can have with you in case Mammal Mapper doesn't work or your phone dies, and just basically instructions for doing the survey. And what we ask for people to do if they do go out and do a square survey is that when they reach their square, we ask them to walk 2 1-kilometer lines in parallel with each other. So where exactly you walk might depend on the layout and landscaping of the square, and it might not be possible for those 2 lines to be perfectly parallel or perfectly straight. That's absolutely fine, but that's what you're aiming to do, and you just do the closest that you possibly can. So in this case, you might come in off the road at Lair, walk out into the square, and then you could either walk from the east across to the west, then work your way north a bit, and then just walk back the other way and end up near the hut circle near Tor Lacade. Or you could walk down to the higher altitude at the south there and walk north and then walk west or east and then back down south, so that you basically just cover 2 1 kilometer transects within the square. Those transects enable you to really focus on where you're walking. So you can look for the detail of some of the signs. So droppings, forms, places where mountain hare might be actually huddled. And you're going to get fairly close to everywhere in the square. And you're going to cross a representative representation of the terrain within that square. But as I said, it might well be that you reach there and that brook, that burn that's coming across there, Alton there, is not passable, or this is all too marshy, and you might have to do whatever you can. So it might end up being very wiggly transects, and that will show up on Mammal Mapper. It will be obvious where the line was that you walked, but there'll be an understanding. If it's not a straight line, we understand it's because a straight line wasn't possible. So don't beat yourself up or put yourself in danger because you couldn't do 2 perfectly straight lines. So this is the kind of landscape you might find yourself in. This is actually a picture taken within that square that you just saw. And there is a mountain hare in this picture. Oh, sorry, have I got... Yes, no, okay. I'm hoping you can still see my, yeah, you still can see my screen. So in this picture that I have taken while doing a mountain hare survey, there is a mountain hare. I don't know if anyone can see it. It certainly wasn't a mountain hare that I saw until just before I took this picture. And this is really, I'm showing you this to give you a sense of the challenges with a mountain hare survey. And how diligent you might have to be. So if you walk out into a landscape like this and you're looking for deer, clearly the deer will be there. They will be taking up space. They'll be breaking the skyline, and they'll be in your way if you get close to them. Mountain hare, unfortunately, you could walk past them less than a meter away and not notice them unless you're being really vigilant and you know what to look for. So in this case, the mountain hare, if you haven't already spotted it, is down the bottom of the screen over towards the left in the cleft between, well, basically a split rock. And I was walking along this square doing my transect, and I had decided that it was very unlikely that I was going to see any signs of mountain hare. And I was concentrating more of my attention than perhaps I should have done on the other side of the river with my binoculars, where the slopes go up. So although from this angle you can't see, there's a hill that goes up just on the other side of the river that's just out of shot to the right. And I thought that was far more likely if there were mountain hare in the area that I would see them on those slopes. But I was diligently walking my transect nonetheless, and I was looking down to check for droppings and for forms and things like that. But nonetheless, I very nearly stepped on this mountain hare. It was right on my transect. And I think if my transect line just happened to have been a few meters one way or the other, I might have walked past this mountain hare and I might have marked that square down as a no presence square. This is also quite a young mountain hare, so it's probably kind of on the move to find a new territory. So this might not be a classic place for an actual population to be resident. However, I did, to be fair, it wasn't until after I'd seen this mountain hare in the end, I did find other signs. So I did find some droppings that I thought were probably mountain hare. Because I'd actually just seen a mountain hare, I knew they were, but I probably would have thought they were anyway. So I would have obviously looked, and I would have recorded that, and I would have looked with special care from that point onwards. But hopefully that gives you a sense. They are. This was taken in the late spring, very early summer. So, as I say, it might have been under a year old. This mountain hare. It's got its summer coat on against browny green landscape, so really easy to miss. So that's me with it. There it is. In case you didn't see it, didn't realize I'd zoomed in. Yeah, so as I said, so this is the most useful survey for us. So it's high effort. We realise you might be going out to a landscape to do one of those red squares that wouldn't be, your ideal walking destination. So if you just are going hill walking in the Highlands, and that's your priority, completely understand that. We just really love you to do a ramble survey. If you are going to do a square survey, but you have absolutely no interest or ability in identifying the birds that you might see. That's where the hare only survey option comes in. So we know that you did a square survey, um, but you weren't trying to record birds. So the fact that you only recorded hares, or you didn't record anything because you didn't see any hares, and you didn't record any birds, it doesn't mean there's no birds there. So that just helps us give the right context to the BTO when we're sharing the information about these surveys. But it's exactly the same process apart from that. So if you do feel able to recognize some of the birds on the list, so it's particularly ground nesting birds and other upland birds, dippers and meadow pipits and curlews and lapwings, things like that, then please do what you can. But if you really feel that's just not where your interest or ability lies, it's obviously better for you to admit that and say that you're just doing a hare only survey. Um, I put this in just as a kind of warning, really. In the Highlands, you will lose uh, connectivity quite a lot of the time. These landscapes, you might go into the lee of a granite hill and or a nice hill, and you suddenly just lose all connection. If your survey just ends like this, don't panic. You haven't lost the data. It will always store everything you've done to that point. It'll just stop that survey, and you can just start a new one. And it will save the other one, and you can just upload as many surveys as make up your transects when you've got connectivity. It should be fine even if you lose any kind of 4G or data signal because it just needs GPS. However, what sometimes happens is you switch to another app and it will take over from Mammal Mapper because Mammal Mapper has access to like your camera and things like that. And if you go into a different nature, so if you go into the CCAP by iNaturalist, for example, and you use the CCAP to ID some heather, you might find that that's ended your survey because Seek said, "Oh, I need to use the camera," and Mammal Mapper said, I can't carry on with the survey then. It's absolutely fine. It doesn't matter. If we don't need an unbroken line that's recorded as one survey, we just need all the bits that you walked recorded in some way. And if all else fails, you can just let us know by email where you walked, the line you walked, and what you saw by emailing science at themammalsociety.org or filling in the BTO's paper survey sheets. So there's always another way. If you do complete a square, you'll have had your survey code there and you're able to just follow a link that the BTO sent you just to let them know that you did it. We'll get the data either way if you've used Mammal Mapper, but this just ensures that they have the confidence to make that red square unavailable for the rest of that season and encourage people to do a different square. Whereas, of course, it's very frustrating if people book several red squares, then don't go out and do any of them, because then if no one else if someone else that might have done the square is discouraged from doing it and we don't get any data at all, that's what we want to avoid. So it's when you've said that you've actually done it that the red square will become grey. So just a quick thinking about the practicalities of undertaking a survey. So as I've mentioned a few times, this is the Highlands, so hill walking is not to be undertaken lightly. So we do encourage people to feel and to be and to feel prepared. So obviously you'll need your smartphone fully charged with Mammal Mapper on it. You can also have these paper sheets that you can download from the BTO website. It's always worth having them anyway. And a pencil, not a pen, in case your paper gets damp. And then we always encourage people to have a proper map with them in case they lose their smartphone in a bog, and a compass, and to know how to use it. Ideally, not be on your own. Wearing proper walking boots, having water with you, having weather appropriate clothing. I've put a waterproof here, but of course, if you're in the Highlands and it's the summer, there's no rain forecast, it's more important that you have a midge net than it is that you've got waterproofs. But best to be prepared for everything because things can change in a matter of minutes in the Highlands. And then really useful to have binoculars because although some of what you're looking for is like on the ground in front of you as you walk, to be able to actually look in detail at what you think might be a hare huddled under a piece of heather. Obviously, I wouldn't have deliberately got as close to that one which you saw in the photo earlier. If I'd seen that from a distance, I wouldn't have gone closer to disturb it, but I would have loved to have binoculars to be able to double check that it is actually what I think it is. There is a right to roam in the Highlands, which is often misunderstood. It does not mean that you can go absolutely anywhere. It just means that you can roam with respect to people and livelihoods and privacy of those people. So as you're walking, just need to be aware of how that landscape might be being used. It might be a grouse moor. You obviously don't just wander across a grouse moor and step on nests. You just need to be careful where your square has taken you and think about what's the respectful and safe way to navigate that square. And if it's taking you, it shouldn't do, given where the squares are, but if it took you through someone's back garden, you don't just climb over someone's fence and walk through and think that that's okay. You'd obviously be in the wrong if someone was to complain about that. We do have a letter as part of the volunteer pack, which just explains about the Mountain Hare Survey. So if you were walking in a respectful way across the landscape and you were challenged by a landowner, by a land manager, someone who's up there, maybe a deer stalker or whatever it might be, it's unlikely to happen, but if you were challenged, you can explain that you are there for a reason and why, and hopefully they will be respectful of that. But above all, be safe. And I've put cows in this picture because probably the most dangerous animal you can encounter in the Highlands is a herd of domesticated cattle, particularly if you've got a dog with you, although we would recommend not having a dog with you for mountain hare surveying for obvious reasons. It's not impossible to do a mountain hare survey with a dog. If you are, toggle on, you're prompted by Mammal Mapper to say whether you have a dog with you, because obviously it lowers the chance that you're going to see an animal. And you're also going to be distracted, so you're less likely to see the signs. But cows can be very interested in dogs. They might also be interested in you. And as benign as they generally are, they're very big, heavy creatures, and you don't want to get trampled by one or stuck between one and a fence. So we always say keep your distance from livestock, particularly cows. And if that means you have to adapt the line that you're drawing for your transect, then that's just the way it goes. Okay, so that's the end of the content, and I can see there is a question in the Q&A, so I'm just going to, so I just put some information up there about membership and our training, which obviously you must be aware of because you're here, but do sign up as a member if you are interested. It's a great way to support us, but also you do get preferential and cheaper access to our training, as well as our membership magazine and all sorts of other benefits. We've got a question: which scenario would use each of the 3 hare surveys? Do they have a unique purpose? So I might have covered this, but I'll cover it just again in case I wasn't clear the first time. So what we would love is for everybody that does the Mountain Hare Survey to go out and do the gold standard, which is you've selected a square. It's one of our priority squares. You're going to go all the way to it, and you're going to walk 2 transects. That way we get the place that we wanted surveyed, we get the data very thoroughly, we get a real confidence that it's been well surveyed to the point when we can actually accurately say there aren't mountain hare there if they weren't spotted and no signs of them were spotted. However, the other 2 are in recognition of the fact that some of those red squares might never be reached by anyone, and that we'd be wasting a huge amount of potential volunteer effort if we restricted the survey to only that gold standard that not that many people are going to be able to do. So if you are in the Highlands and you're at any point hill walking or able to just pop out into a landscape that falls into the survey area, just letting us know that you're there, letting us know that you're looking for signs of hare, and letting us know whether or not you see them, all of that can factor in to our report and the Mountain Hare Survey findings each year. So it's just that the ramble is a less structured survey. It's something that people can do if they're out anyway, and they're not necessarily able to give up quite as much time and quite as much of a commitment as a square survey. The other difference, the hare only, as I think I did cover this, is just if you're not going to be looking for signs of other mammals or birds. You're literally just there to do the bare minimum, which is verify whether or not mountain hare are present, which just kind of keeps the time. It's slightly easier. It's slightly less volunteer effort. You can do the same distance, the same site, but take less time. But it's obviously very important that we know that you weren't looking and recording those other signs. Otherwise, we might take conclusions from the fact that there were none recorded. Okay, one more question. Oh, sorry, Lily. Okay, that's great. So unless anyone has any other questions, we'll wind up there. And I'll just finish by saying, if you are interested in taking part, if you search the Mountain Hare Survey, Mammal Society BTO, you will find where to kind of go down that journey of selecting a square. But if you're interested, but you still feel you need a bit of hand-holding, which is completely understandable, it's a little bit of a complex survey, then if you follow this tiny URL link, it's the link to our webpage, where there's a link to a form where you can just express your interest, and we can be in touch with you. We can answer any questions you might have. And if you let us know where you're going to be in the Highlands and when, we can go through the process of selecting the most sensible square for you to survey and sending you those details, rather than you having to kind of go through and select it yourself. So do feel free to just express your interest on that form and we'll get in touch with you. Otherwise, please do just have Mammal Mapper on your phone. And if you're in the Highlands, and you can put it onto Hare Ramble when you're doing any hill walking or when you're able to pop out into the landscape for a bit of a look. We would really appreciate it. Your data is incredibly valuable. Okay, well, thanks very much. And I hope that that's answered any questions you did have. If you realize there's something which still doesn't make sense and the training is finished, just email us. You can email science@mammalsociety.org, or you can find details on our website. We'll be very happy to answer any questions that make you feel able to take part. There is a face-to-face, in-person Mountain Hare Survey training coming up on the 7th of March in the Cairngorms. So if that happens to be when you're in the Highlands, or if you are based in the Highlands and that's somewhere you can get to, it's also free. It's at Glenshee Mountain Resort, which is somewhere where there is a population of mountain hares. So when we'd go through some of the same information, but obviously a little bit more kind of hands-on and practical. And then we'll actually go out and practice those techniques, see if we can find signs of mountain hare, see if we can spot mountain hare in the hills, so that if you go to a site where you are not sure there are mountain hare or not, you'll hopefully be able to put those skills to use there as well. So do sign up for that on Eventbrite if that's of interest. All right, thanks very much for joining today. I'll let you all get on with your evenings, and we'll hopefully see your Mountain Hare Survey Square records come pouring in over this spring and summer. Thanks very much all.